Sometimes the biggest things in our lives start in places so ordinary we barely notice them at first. For Apple, that place was a simple garage in Los Altos, California, where two young dreamers believed they could change the world. And they did. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak weren't legends. They were just two friends, one with an eye for design and vision, the other with a passion for building machines that worked better than anything else around. They didn't start with money, connections, or global ambitions. They started with an idea, a personal computer that was affordable, usable, and designed for everyday people. Before we continue, a quick reminder, most of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy tech reviews on smartphones, wearables and laptops, please hit like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. The Apple I wasn't glamorous. It was a bare circuit board sold for $666.66, but it was something new, a computer you could actually buy, assemble and use at home without needing a corporate laboratory or millions of dollars. That one product carried them out of the garage and into the future. The real turning point came with the Apple II. Launched in 1977, it was colourful, reliable and ready to use right out of the box. This wasn't just for hobbyists anymore. Schools began adopting it, kids were introduced to computing through it, and businesses started paying attention. The Apple II didn't just sell well, it created a cultural shift. And with that shift, Apple wasn't just a small company anymore. By 1980, Apple went public, and Jobs, Wozniak and their investors suddenly became very wealthy. But more than that, they had influence, power and momentum. Jobs wanted to take things further. He wasn't satisfied with making a computer that worked. He wanted to create a machine that inspired people. And that vision became the Macintosh, released in 1984. The Macintosh introduced something the world hadn't seen in a personal computer, a graphical interface. You didn't need to type lines of code. You could point, click and drag. The famous 1984 Super Bowl ad set the tone, positioning Apple as a revolutionary force against the dull, grey, monolithic world of IBM. The Mac was beautiful, but behind the scenes Apple was messy. Sales were disappointing. Jobs clashed with executives. By 1985, he was forced out of his own company. The story could have ended right there. Without Jobs, Apple stumbled. They made computers, but they lacked focus. They released products that didn't connect with people the way the Apple II or the first Mac had. The company made money, but the spark was gone. During those years, Jobs built Next, a computer company focused on high-end machines. He also bought a struggling graphics studio from George Lucas, which became Pixar. One company failed commercially, but the other would change movies forever. And while Jobs grew as a leader, Apple kept searching for its identity. By the mid-1990s, Apple was in trouble. Their products felt outdated, their market share was shrinking. At one point they were only months away from bankruptcy. That's when Apple did something unexpected. They brought Steve Jobs back. In 1997, Jobs returned to Apple, not as the same impulsive dreamer from the garage, but as someone tempered by failure, experience and a new perspective. He cut unnecessary products, he focused on design, he pushed for clarity, and in 1998 the iMac was born. The iMac wasn't just another computer, it was colourful, fun and unapologetically different. It felt alive, in a way machines usually didn't. The iMac reminded people what Apple stood for: creativity, simplicity and personality. But Apple's story didn't stop at computers. In 2001 they launched the iPod, a tiny device that let you carry 1,000 songs in your pocket. It wasn't just a product, it was a cultural phenomenon. The iPod paired with iTunes changed how we consumed music. Suddenly music was portable, digital, and yours to carry everywhere. Apple had stepped outside the world of computers and into our everyday lives. Then came 2007. Steve Jobs stood on stage in his trademark black turtleneck and introduced something that combined an iPod, a phone and an internet communicator into one. The iPhone wasn't just a device, it was the start of a new era. At first, people didn't fully realize how revolutionary it was, but soon it became clear. The iPhone changed communication, entertainment, business, and even relationships. It redefined what a phone could be and turned Apple into one of the most powerful companies in history. A year later, Apple introduced the App Store, opening the door for developers everywhere to build apps that expanded the iPhone's capabilities. That single decision reshaped the tech industry. It gave rise to entire companies, Uber, Instagram, WhatsApp, all built on the back of Apple's ecosystem. With each iPhone generation, Apple grew bigger, stronger, and more influential. Then came the iPad, the Apple Watch, AirPods, and services like Apple Music, iCloud, and Apple TV+. Apple was no longer just a tech company, it was part of everyday culture, woven into the way people live, work, and dream. In 2011, Steve Jobs passed away. It was the end of an era. For many, it felt impossible to imagine Apple without him. But under Tim Cook, Apple didn't collapse. It adapted. It grew into one of the most valuable companies on earth, worth trillions of dollars. Apple leaned into services, expanded its global reach, and kept refining products. It wasn't always flashy, but it was consistent. And it showed something important, that Apple wasn't just one man. It was a vision carried forward by thousands of people who believed in design, simplicity, and possibility. Today, Apple isn't just a company, it's a part of global culture. Billions of people use iPhones. AirPods are everywhere. Apple stores feel like modern temples to technology, and whether you love or criticize them, you can't ignore the impact. From a small garage in 1976 to a global empire today, Apple's journey is a reminder that even the most ordinary beginnings can create extraordinary change. What can we learn from Apple's story? First, failure doesn't mean the end. Jobs was fired, and yet he came back stronger. Second, focus matters. Apple's greatest successes came when they simplified, cut distractions, and poured energy into fewer, better products. And third, innovation is about more than technology. It's about making tools that feel human, that connect with us, that inspire us. Apple's genius wasn't just in creating machines, it was in shaping how we experience the world through them. So the next time you pick up your phone, or put in your earbuds, or open your laptop, remember this. It all started with two guys in a garage surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and a dream so crazy it almost didn't work. And maybe that's the real lesson. The future doesn't always come from the people with the most money, the best office, or the biggest head start. Sometimes it comes from the kids in the garage, stubborn enough to believe they can change the world.